The Minnesota Vikings, despite putting up 12 points off 4 field goals, 3 picks from their quarterback, Sam Darnold, made history against the Jacksonville Jaguars in their 12-7 win to advance to 7-2 and could have been tied for first place in the NFC North. Detroit Lions have a tiebreaker, of course, but the Houston Texans had a second half meltdown despite Jared Goff throwing for a bunch of interceptions. They somehow still win that football game 26-23 because of the brick salesman who knocked down another game-winning field goal. He did it against the Vikings earlier in the year, and he does it again against the Houston Texans. But what was so fascinating about the Minnesota Vikings win is how rare this kind of win is in the NFL. And we're going to look at the last time that this kind of win has happened in the NFL. So let's just share the stat with you right away. Here it is. The Vikings are the first team to win a game with 0 touchdowns and 3+ turnovers since 2006. So teams had lost 195 straight games that put up the stat line that the Minnesota Vikings put up in their win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we can look at it 2 different ways. Somehow, some way, a team like the Vikings found a way to win. And 2, we can look at it like this. We can really give thanks that the Minnesota Vikings were facing it off against the Mac Jones-led Jacksonville Jaguars because they were atrocious and they were despicable to watch. As bad as the Vikings were offensively, the Jaguars were even worse in this football game. Somehow that is possible. But I think it's fun to look back on the 2006 game, the last time that this has happened, because this is historic. We're looking at 18 years of a statistic, of a fact that's never been done before. And you know what's odd about this statistic? The last time that this has happened was against the Minnesota Vikings. In 2006, the Vikings played against the Green Bay Packers in Week 16 on a Thursday, December 21st football game. And they lost 9-7. So let's just go back into the archives, because who's the quarterback for the Vikings in 2006? Is it T-Jack? Like who's the quarterback for the Vikings in this football game? Is it Tavares Jackson? Tavares Jackson, 10 for 20, 50 yards, 2.5 yards per throw, average, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, took 3 sacks for 23 yards. R.I.P. Tavares Jackson. He died recently. Not recently, a couple years ago in a car crash. He had a QBR of 1.8 and a passer rating of 35.4. And he had 5 carries for 23 yards because he was fast. Brett Favre, former Minnesota Viking great, 26 for 50, 285 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 picks, 1 sack for 12 yards. So they knocked down 3 field goals in this game. A field goal in the first quarter, field goal in the second quarter. The Vikings scored a touchdown to go up 7-6, and then the Packers knocked down a field goal in the fourth quarter. I'm guessing by Minnesota Vikings legend Ryan Longwell. Who's their kicker? No, I guess not. I guess he was already a Minnesota Viking. He's already a Minnesota Viking. Look at that. He made an extra point in that game. So what is so crazy about the fact that I shared earlier is that the last time it happened was against the Minnesota Vikings in their loss against the Green Bay Packers in 2006. I'm just curious, who scored the Minnesota Vikings' only touchdown in this game? Because T-Jack didn't throw a touchdown. The running backs did not have a touchdown. Chester Taylor and Artosi Pinner Those guys didn't have a touchdown, which means their wide receivers didn't have a touchdown unless it came on a reverse. No, nothing there. Okay, how did they score a touchdown? Was it a defensive touchdown? Brett Favre did have 2 picks. Let's look at the defense. Fred Smoot. What a name. Fred Smoot had a pick 6 touchdown in this football game. Unless it was a fumble pickup. But I think it was a pick 6 because Antoine Winfield had a fumble reception. So Fred Smoot, the only way the Vikings scored in this game was because of a Fred Smoot pick 6. We're going down the archives in Minnesota Vikings history. So the Vikings win against the Jacksonville Jaguars is rare air. And you think about how they won. Darnold threw 3 picks near the red zone. It should have been a dominant performance by the Minnesota Vikings. You should have blew this game out of the water. And they were playing like they should have, driving the football down the field on almost every single possession, except they just could not convert anything. Everything was just atrocious or ugly once the Vikings got down to the goal line. It was just, is senile a good word to use in this situation? What's the definition of senile? Because it feels like the word that keeps on coming to me is senile. Maybe Vikings felt senile after a senile depression. No, I just want to type in definition. Senile definition. Senile. A person having or showing the weakness or diseases of old age, especially a loss of mental faculties. I think that works for this situation. The Vikings offense was senile, atrocious, weak, terrible once they got into the red zone. But some way, because of Harrison Phillips and Mac Jones having a terrible snap with his center, because of Byron Murphy Jr. and his interception that Mac Jones threw right to him, and because of Cam Bynum, because up until that point, the Vikings still hadn't sealed the deal. The Jacksonville Jaguars were giving this game away on a silver platter, and the Vikings still had to have one last takeaway by Cam Bynum to win this football game. So it is bonkers that the Vikings still somehow found a way to win, because this was a game that nobody wanted to win. Sam Darnold was like, hey, Jacksonville Jaguars, take it. But Mac Jones outdueled Sam Darnold in who wanted this football game less. And somehow, at the end of the day, no one's going to look back on this game in a few years except look at the win-loss record. This counts as a win. And the Minnesota Vikings advanced to 7-2, one game behind the Detroit Lions, and they have the second best record in the NFC. Eagles are 7-2. Detroit Lions are 8-1. And Vikings are 7-2. What a season. And the Green Bay Packers are 6-3. I think they had a bye week this week. But crazy win, crazy facts about the win. And we got to dive into the archives a little bit. 2006 Vikings, Fred Smoot, Chester Taylor, T-Jack. I saw Mewelde Moore in the stat line for the Vikings. Wow, it's craziness. Thanks for making this podcast part of your day. Hit that subscribe button right there.